What a legacy of comics, going back to when he was barely a teenager, and we'll get into all that and more, but made his impact at DC, Marvel, Valiant, and many other comic companies, post-Valiant as well. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Jim Shooter.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to be here. What are we going to do? Questions?
Well, yeah. Well, first I just want to, does everyone know the origin story of Shooter?
By now, everyone knows that.
Well, would you mind for my
All right.
audio audience?
I was 13 years old, and my family needed money. So when you're 13, they're not going to hire you at a factory. So I thought, somebody must get paid for these comics, and I loved comics. So I sent stuff into DC, and the long story short, sent them a few things. They bought them, and then they wanted to use me as a regular writer, and that's how I got started. When they found out I was, at that point, 14, they were a little bit put back, but they got over it, and I just kept going. And here I am 58 years later.
But Jim, that's amazing. And I mean, other kids would maybe get a paper route or shovel sidewalks and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I had a paper route, but a couple of bucks a week doesn't make a difference.
No, but also to be that young and really look at comics, break them down, figure out how they were written, and to get them to bite and everything. And if you don't mind, I would like to ask questions about, because these guys, their names speak for themselves, but truly, like Mort Weissinger.
Yes.
Tell me about working for Mort Weissinger.
Mort Weissinger was mean as a snake, famously mean. He was one of those old-fashioned editors who would always call you a moron, so you wouldn't ask for a raise. I lived in Pittsburgh. It's 400 miles away, so most of the business was done over the phone. And so, 14 years old, 13, 14 years old, and this big important man from New York who's a vice president and the head editor at DC Comics would call me up and yell at me for an hour every Thursday night right after the Batman TV show. And, and he's, what's this supposed to be? Why can't you spell? Is this a gun or a carrot? I'm doing layouts, come on. It's like, he was very harsh. I thought it was just me, I didn't know. I lived in Pittsburgh. I didn't know anybody else in the business. And then I went, but I would start going to the office on business to visit, to occasionally be taught something, or just have conferences or whatever. And one time I saw him just torturing his assistant, and it was a silly thing too. And he was like. I started to realize that's just his MO. It's not me. That's what he does. And so after that, I kind of let it roll off my back. I still didn't argue with him or anything. I needed the money, And but he was like that with everybody apparently. The apocryphal story is that at his funeral, they couldn't get anybody to do the eulogy. And finally, they found some guy who had known him all his life, and he did. This is probably apocryphal. He came up and he thought for a minute. He said, "Well, his brother was worse."
I'm going to ask you to. I'm going to just back it up just a little bit. There's old radio guy. We're overmodulating, but
I don't know.
No, you're good.
All right.
But again, God, the Legion stuff. You created Pharaoh Lad. You created Princess Projector. You created Karate Kid.
Yep.
And I'm of that 70s generation that was reading the reprints in the 100-page spectaculars and the 80-page giants and all that stuff. And then when I found out years later, he was 13. I'm like, or 14. I'm like, that's great because literally you were writing to your peers.
Well, it was a unique situation. It'll never happen again. My monthly book, the one I did every month, was Adventure Comics featuring Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. And that was about teenage heroes in the future, right? So here I was the same age as my characters. And to a large extent, the same age as the audience, right? And we all grew up together.
Yeah, no shit. Absolutely. Seriously, man, that's so amazing. And again, it's a testament to your ability to break those things down, reading them, and figure out how to write.
That's the second time you said that. Now, let me tell you, he's
Please.
right. Yeah, because when I was 12, that's when I discovered these Marvel comics. I always liked comics, but I got kind of bored with them because they all seemed to be the same, after a while. Lois Lane was always trying to discover secret identity of Superman.
Yeah.
The Batman was always fighting the Riddler and the Penguin on top of a giant typewriter or toothpaste tube or something. And, it just, they started to get a little tedious. And there weren't any other superheroes other than them at the time, really.
Yeah.
So these newfangled Marvels come along. I was 12 years old, and I read these, and it just, wow, these are good, And I'm thinking, why aren't these? And I was in a hospital for a very minor surgery, and in a kid's ward in those days, four beds in a ward, there would be tons of comics. And I had a week to kill, so I picked up some of the DC comics. They were pristine, looked like nobody ever opened them. And they were the same as I, kind of bailed out on them a couple of years before. And these new Marvels, they were all ratty and dog-eared. Everybody read those, And so when I read them, I found out why. They were just better. And that's when I decided, hey, if I could figure this out, why these are good and why these aren't, why I like these and some of those, and why I don't like the others, then, maybe I could, somebody must get paid for doing this. Maybe I could write them. So I literally spent a year studying. Taking notes, and carefully trying to figure out, like, what the usual, MO was for the comics. Stan, I figured out for DC, the usual MO was very straightforward, it was almost a formula. Stan didn't do that. He did it all in different ways, and yet he got the same things done. Shortly into the story, you knew who the characters were. Soon into the story, some problem would arise, or something would cause them to have a conflict, and then there would be intrigue and adventure and suspense all the way, and then you reach a point where whatever was the conflict, it was resolved, and then they were in a different situation, slightly different situation than before. Didn't have to be extremely different. Made a new friend, learned something, whatever. It could be anything. But so to me, it became, it's a journey. Okay, we start here and we get to here, and the story is how we do that.
Absolutely.
And so I really studied this stuff, and so when I wrote my first issues, usually people, when they send in their first submissions, they're doing it for fun. And B, they want to fix everything that they ever think. They want Aunt May dead on the first issue. They want Peter Parker happy and wealthy and by the second issue. And I saw they just didn't do that. They didn't make sudden moves like that. So I thought the Legion Clubhouse was stupid, But it's like a rocket stuck in
upside down rocket, yeah, man.
And the way John Fort used to draw it, it was about the size of a phone booth, and all the parading in there. And it had one of those old-fashioned keyholes, like
Superman's Fortress.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I didn't like that, but I thought if I change that on the first issue, they won't buy it, because that's not what they do, And so I kept the old one. I made it bigger. They didn't seem to mind that. That was fine. But I really tried to figure out, what not to do. You don't kill Aunt May. She wasn't in those books, of course. I'm just joking. But anyway.
That's awesome. I also I saw in an article. Are there aspiring writers in the audience?
Anybody?
Okay. Well, I'll even say this because there one person. Absolutely, I appreciate it. Nice hat,
Two.
by the way. I read in an article where you broke down Rocky as one of the perfect stories.
Well, it's not a perfect story. It's an example of a story.
Structure.
It's a structure example. You introduce Rocky. Introduce. What does that mean? We have to understand who this guy is. And so in Rocky, you start off with this guy in a ring. He's a fighter, right? And you learn about him in the first 15 or 20 minutes a lot, about, the girl he's interested in and the loan shark he works for and blah, 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 blah. And then, all right, well, okay, he's an aging pug, and if nothing happens, I guess we'll just play cards all night. I don't know. But something happens. He miraculously gets a shot at the champ. Okay. That's the element that disrupts the status quo. We know who he is. We know his status quo. Something disrupts it. And that sends all kinds of things spinning. It changes everything. It changes his relationship with the girl. It changes his relationship with the loan shark. It changes his relationship with the manager. There's little mini conflicts all along the way. It changes his relationship with the future brother-in-law. And conflicts ensue, and there's interesting stuff all along the way. And then it comes to the fight, or it comes to the night before the fight. And this is called a twist. He realizes he can't possibly beat the champ, right? However, no one has ever gone the distance. Yeah, and everybody thinks he's just a pug. The champ's manager says, try to give us a good show,
Right.
And stuff like that. It diminishes him all the time. So his goal changes to going the distance, because that it proves he had a right to be there. It proves he's a man, right? So then we come to the fight, and I'm not recommending it as high art. Stallone uses every fight cliche there ever was. The cut the eye, the long count, oh, come on. But anyway, it come to the night of the fight, and he's in there, and it's tough, but he gets all the way to the end of the 15th round. And that fight went on another 10 seconds, he'd win, because the champ was hurt.
Yep.
So then the bell dings. That's the climax. And importantly, everything is resolved. Rocky, the champ says no rematch. Rocky says don't want one. Yep. And he calls his girlfriend's name. Okay. Future brother-in-law is thrilled. He's there, I guess he bet on it, and he's there with the hooker. The loan shark is thrilled.
Yep.
Adrian comes running into the ring. He's going to go home with $500,000. All conflicts are resolved. And so there we are at the end. That doesn't keep them from doing a whole lot of sequels, but it's a complete journey. Aging pug, contender,
Yeah.
And so I use that as an example of structure, but to simplify it, I use Little Miss Muffet. Little Miss Muffet sat on top of it, eating her curds and whey. Along came a spider and sat down beside her and scared poor Miss Muffet away. If you can remember Little Miss Muffet, you can remember the pillars of a story. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet eating her curds and whey. Who's our girl? Little Miss Muffet. What's she doing? She's having lunch. All right. Along came a spider. Something is going to disrupt lunch, right? A spider, that'll screw up lunch. Sat down beside her. Now we're in that middle part where there's conflict, suspense. You don't know. It could bite her. It could be poisonous. She might step on it. You don't know. What's going to happen? Got to find out. Scared poor Miss Muffet. See, that's the moment of life or death. Scared poor Miss Muffet. She sees it. Away. She gets away. So if you can remember Little Miss Muffet, it's, who we got, what's our situation, something happens to change it, what does that cause, well, how does that send them on a journey, what is the outcome, if there are conflicts, which side wins, or how otherwise is the conflict resolved. Miss Muffet gets away. And she'll never go back there for lunch anymore. So if you remember that, now if you start looking for Little Miss Muffet in every movie, every TV show, every novel, everything written by a competent professional writer, you will find Little Miss Muffet. Everything Shakespeare ever wrote, everything Hemingway ever wrote, everything at J.D. Salinger, Steinbeck, J.K. Rowling, everybody, because that's a story. And the fact that the story has a definition does not limit you. It didn't limit any of the people I just named, nor did it limit the writers Laverne and Shirley, or SpongeBob, sure. Whatever. It's always there. A sentence has a definition too. It's a complete thought. A story is a complete journey. Okay, so once you understand that stuff, and then you can start to throw. Oh, let's make it visual. Let's throw in a car chase. How about some hand to fang fighting with Little Miss Muffet and the spider? You can dress it up. Introduce subplots, supporting characters. Put a twist in it, like Rocky, where in the middle it goes from being about a fight to being about a fighter. I didn't make any of this stuff up. This is Aristotle talking to you. He wrote a book called The Poetics, where he realized that there was something called a story. And in fact, he didn't figure this out, but it is built into your brain. Because if you think in a Western language, and especially a Romance language, there's a syntax to language. That's the logic of the language. The syntax of almost all Western languages is cause and effect. I'm simplifying it here, you linguists and professors, but that's what it is, cause and effect. Cause, who is it and what do they do? Effect, how did it come out?
What it happens, yeah,
That's that's the basic logic of our language, and that's why a story is what it is. Who and what happens, how did it come out.
That's great, man.
All right.
Absolutely. No, that was amazing. And again, I love this because I don't know if you guys know the screenwriter Robert McKee.
Yes.
Wrote a book story, and I figured you knew Jim. But this guy would hold seminars on how to write that stuff, and Jim just succinctly explained the basics of story. It's the journey.
Yes.
I mean, certainly the start and the destination, but the journey is the story.
I do recommend the Robert McKee books, Story, and I think he has Dialogue and a few others. I recommend them. I don't agree with every word he says, but it's really pretty good. And he does what I did with Rocky. He does that with Casablanca.
Great.
To show you what he does. Excellent books. And there are no really good books on writing comics. There are some bad ones, but there are no good ones. I'm writing one. I hope it's going to be a good one.
Oh, that's great, Jim.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah, and because see, I learned, this is the wisdom of the ancients. It's not me talking. Not only was Aristotle kind of the first to, he went to the theatron one day and he came home. He said, that was lousy. Why? And then he figured out, what was going on. He was the first to codify it. Then 350 years later, a Roman scholar, poet named Horace, he was a big fan of Aristotle's. He thought he had some ideas to contribute. So he wrote a book called Ars Poetica. And then since then, of course, there's been all these great people, the Shakespeares and the Miltons and all J.K. Rowling and Hemingway and all. And each of them, with their work, teaches you the same thing. And I don't know where they learned it, but they did. And it's Little Miss Muffet is always there. The only thing I don't recommend is trying to learn it from comics, because most comic book writers couldn't write their weight out of a paper bag.
Hilarious.
All right? They just don't know what they're doing. They string together a bunch of scenes that aren't necessarily related. They think, oh, it's an exciting scene. Well, it probably is. But people won't know, how'd it come out? Or something will pop up and they'll say, well, wait a minute, I didn't know that guy was, had a gun, Anyway, comic book writers in general, there are some good ones. Don't get me wrong. There's some really good ones. But a lot of them are just kind of winging it. They've been reading them all their lives, and they think, well, now the comics have been talking to them all their lives, and now they think, well, now it's my turn to talk, and they just say anything they want, and it just wanders around, or it doesn't fulfill the definition of a story. And that's, so comics is dicey. The best comics writers like Archie Goodwin or who's here at the show?
Howard? Chaykin?
Yeah, Howard's good. Yeah, there's who's the guy with the big line over there?
Oh God, I've been spending most of the time in the panel room, so I'm trying to think.
Oh, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
There were some really
Sure.
good guys, you know, and Stan was good, and
Garth Ennis, maybe.
yeah.
All right, there you go.
Name couldn't come
Buddy,
to mind.
it's all good. Please, it's Sunday.
Yeah. Anyway, so I would recommend you go to other media, and it's also easier to watch a movie with your notebook and a clicker in your hand, right? And every time that they move the camera, you just saw a panel. Every time they change the scene, you know, you should stop and think, what did this professional writer tell me? Professional writer, professional director, what did they tell me? How did they tell me? And why did they tell me that? And if you look at a film like a Cameron film, you know, you always can see, like, there's no fat on it. There's no, all right, let's take Indiana Jones, for instance, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I happen to know that, you know, Indiana Jones was a fabulous ballroom dancer, right? They don't mention that because you don't need to know that. All right, I made that up, but there's nothing in there that you don't need to know. And what's the first time when we see Indy the first time? What's he doing? He's recovering some artifact. That's what he does. He's Little Miss Muffet. He's on his tuffet. You know, and we find out in that scene, by the way, giant tarantulas, no problem. Just sweeps them off with his whip, you know. But he sees a snake. Whoa. Mark that down. That's going to come up again. You know, because there's no wasted space there.
Yep.
It's always, and it's the same with like a Cameron film. You'll find that everything he told you for a reason. And you start, if you start breaking things down that you're looking at, stopping it with a clicker and thinking, what did they show me? How did they show me? Why? And then make a little note or something. You start to get it. And when you start to watch some of that stuff looking for Little Miss Muffet, you will always see Little Miss Muffet, always. In the most sophisticated and complex things. Even if the guy doesn't do it in order. You know, just showing off, I had Frank Miller kind of reverse the whole thing. He introduces the character at the end. You know, but he tells the story interestingly the whole way, so that when we really get to know the characters on the last page, and you know, just showing off, you know. But Shakespeare never did that. Salinger never did that. Hemingway never did that. You know, J.K. Rowling, as far as I know, never did that. You know, most people do tell it in order because our brains are hardwired. What's the cause? What's the effect? You know, if you find it's some big guy in a bar and ask him, you know, hey, Bronco, tell me about your biggest game. He'll tell you everything, probably in order. He'll say, oh, it was a state championship, and, you know, and then he'll come to a spider, oh, and then I fumbled the ball, you know, and, you know, it's the fourth quarter and we have to score. And then if he forgets something, we'll correct him. He'll say, well, give me the ball for one last play, and I'm charging toward the goal line, and this big linebacker's in my way. And we say, wait a minute, you didn't mention any linebacker. We'll correct him. He'll say, oh, I forgot, you know? Because we correct each other, because we're all storytellers too. You tell everyday stories. What happened at school? What happened at work? You know, anything. It's natural to us. And that's why it resonates with all of us when you see a good movie like a Cameron film or Raiders or whatever. Sorry. Enough rant. Okay.
No, man, but that's amazing. Do you guys have questions? Because obviously, this is your opportunity to talk to Jim about classic stuff. Yes, the microphone's there if you don't mind, just for the purposes of my audio.
Either that or yell.
Yeah, or if you don't mind yelling. But sir, please.
How did Secret Wars came about?
Yeah, I was going to ask that as well, please. If you don't
Kenner Toys made a deal with DC Comics to do superhero toys. The toy companies all spy on each other. And so Mattel found out about that. And so they didn't, just as a hedge against Kenner, and just in case superhero toys turned out to be the next big thing, they came to the only other game in town, which was us. And they went to our licensing people. And I have to say, none of the executives of Marvel that were my level or the president. I was vice president. So none of the other vice presidents or the president ever opened a comic book in their lives. And most of their top employees also never opened a comic book in their lives. These are people licensing Marvel characters, and they don't know who they are or what characters are ours. One time, one of my licensing VPs licensed Wonder Woman. And she's all proud of it. She said, I made such a great deal. I said, Gail, we don't own Wonder Woman. She says, what do you mean? I said, we don't own Wonder Woman. That's DC. And she said, but, now what am I going to do? I said, call up what's-her-face over there at DC and tell her you teed up a deal for her. You act like you did her a favor, And, and she just can't, she couldn't believe it. She said, why would they call me? I said, well, obviously, they didn't know we didn't own Wonder Woman, and neither did you. So, they made the same mistake you did. Anyway, I said, why don't you open a comic book sometime? And then, all right, so Secret Wars. So they're talking to our licensing people, and the Mattel people are saying, well, what do you got? And the licensing people are looking at the list. We got Ghost Rider. We got Daredevil. And the Mattel people, we've never heard of these. Who were they, So, of course, as usual, I am summoned to the meeting because I'm the only one of the executive staff who can intelligently discuss the comics. And so I go in there and I say, no, we have a lot of good characters, and Iron Man, Thor, blah, 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 blah. And I said, we do have some that have a good deal of exposure. Spider-Man, on TV, and the Hulk on TV. And they said, yeah, but even those two don't have Q scores like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Robin. That's the big four. And you know what a Q score is? That's like you ask 1,000 people who it is, and if you're 900 of them know your Q score is 900. Anyway, they said, but even they're not that. And I said, well, look, think of it this way. I said, one of your main markets is us, okay? The direct markets, conventions, and so forth. I said, in that market, and in general, Marvel is outselling DC 5-1. I said, everyone in that market knows all of these characters, right? And that's where you're going to sell a lot of toys. They said, oh, okay. So they said, well, it would be really good, though, if you got us some publicity somehow, if you did something big to give us publicity. I said, how about I do one giant story, 12 issues, and it'll have all the major heroes and all the major villains in one epic story. And they said, all right, that'll do. And they didn't have any involvement in the comic book. We didn't send them anything to approve, didn't ask them any questions, they didn't do it. In a conversation unrelated to Secret Wars, one of their executives told me that they had a focus group, and the kids' two favorite words were secret and wars. I said, all right, Secret Wars, it's on another planet, nobody knows, it's a secret. And so that was one of their small contributions. Other than that, they just left us alone to do a good story. And I knew a little bit about the toy business. And so I was trying to think of I knew we were going to start, the first issue of Secret Wars was going to come out in January. And I wanted it to be in continuity. I didn't want it to just be some silly story off to the side that didn't count. So I decided those 12 issues were going to, in continuity-wise, would fall in between the December issues and the January issues. And I told the writers, I said, you get the characters I was using, I said, you get your character to Central Park. They don't care how. Get them to Central Park at the end of your December book. You will pick them up again in Central Park in January. So now I'm trying to think, what could I do that would, be different? Like you go to war, you're going to come home changed somehow, psychologically or whatever. And so I was trying to think of things that would be interesting and different and stuff. And some fan had suggested that we give Spider-Man a black costume once. 2 words, black costume, no other description. So I thought, yeah, that'd be good. Spider-Man leaves in a red and blue and comes back in a black. So I called Zek and asked him to design a costume. He said, what do you want? I said, you're Mike Zek, figure it out. And he did exactly one design. And all right. So I had that plan. Aha, and being toy savvy, I happen to know that Mattel has its own private toy fair, or they used to, in January. The regular Toy Fair is February. But Mattel has one in Scottsdale, Arizona in January. So when that suit came out, and we got massive media attention all over the country, papers, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Miami Herald, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, newspapers all over the country were calling to get information on it. Yep. And got radio, TV, all 3 wire services. It just was a big hit. I'd say, how about that, Mattel? You know, they were happy because it came out right. All that publicity hit just as their Toy Fair was about to happen. So they were happy with that. And then in this story, which is for the regular Marvel Comics has already taken place, but it hasn't all come out yet. So the debut, the creation of the black costume, I timed for issue 8, which is August, which is the month where they sell in the Christmas toys. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got brains. Anyway. I have few. Anyway, so that's the story of Secret Wars, and we just did the best comic book we could. We just tried to make it interesting and care about it, and try to make it as spectacular as it ought to be. Because if you're doing it with all the major heroes and all the major villains, it better be good. It better be big.
That's awesome. Am I right, Jim, that we saw Spider-Man in the black costume after the first chapter in his regular book, but we didn't know how he got into that until issue 8 of Secret War?
Right.
So there were kind of surprises that way of like, wait a minute, he's changed. Why has he changed?
Yeah, they dropped clues and stuff, but I mean, nobody spelled it out.
Okay.
And it came out slowly, which was part of the plan.
100%.
And and I have to say, when I told the Spider-Man, I was the boss, so I could tell them what to do. And I tried not to be a bozo about it. I tried to, work with them and coordinate with what they were doing and stuff. And when I had to plan Secret Wars all out well in advance so that I could tell them, when your character comes back in January, this is what it's gonna be like. I had to design everything. Mike Zeck had to design everything way up front. So anyway, when I told the Spider-Man team, editor, writer, he's going to come back in this black costume and explain how he got it and everything. They said, well, what do you want us to do with it? And I said, anything you want. And so they said, oh, yeah, maybe it could be an alien symbiote. I told them it was probably alive. I told them that much.
Cool.
And then they said, well, maybe it's a symbiote, I thought, that's probably not the most original idea I ever heard, but okay. I mean, it didn't renege. I said, do anything you want, and the size just backed off. And guess what? Yeah, it might not have been the most original idea, but they knocked it out of the park. I mean, it was really cool the way they handled it, and people loved it.
100%.
And so that was good. And like I said, I tried to work with the guys. Chris Claremont had a storyline running in the X-Men where Kitty Pryde and Colossus are having this kind of forbidden romance. He's older, she's young, and just a romance, no hanky-panky. But anyway, so Chris, when he reads the plot for the whole series of Secret War, he says, this is going to take a while. I said, yeah, I didn't specify exactly how long they're going to be away, but yeah, it is substantial time. And he said, well, then you're going to have to address this storyline with Kitty and Colossus. I said, well, I guess so. He said, I wish you wouldn't do that. He said, I'd like to finish that myself. I said, okay, Chris, I'll leave Kitty home. He said, you do that for me? I said, sure. And I said, I'll throw this in. I'll have Colossus have a fling while he's on Battle World. And he said, that plays into my hands. I said, you're welcome.
Awesome.
So anyway, I tried to work with people and coordinate. John Byrne didn't want to cooperate at all. He said, I don't want to do this, I said, well, that's too bad, John, because you have to. But I said, isn't there anything you want to do with the FF that you haven't been able to do yet? He said, I'd really like to have the She-Hulk replace the Thing for a while. I said, well, I'll leave the Thing on Battle World. How's that? And that's because he can change back and forth there. And he said, oh, wow. All of a sudden, it was his favorite thing. But so I tried to work with everybody, tried to get along with everybody, and not be a total jerk about it. But anyway.
Sir.
Well, I I was just wondering if you could speak to the fact of, you being an editor and you're dealing with all these creative types and you're pulling in scripts and you're pulling in artwork. How did that work?
Especially, Jim, and forgive me to build on that, that a lot of these guys had been doing it for a long time, and you're the new guy, and you may have new ideas as the editor. A lot of these writers and artists, well, certainly the writers, had already had a turn as an editor-in-chief. So, yeah, how did all that work out?
Well, it was difficult, and you've heard the expression herding cats, but that's only half of it. It's like you said, a lot of these guys have been there a long time. I was the editor for 2 years first, and they'd never even had an editor before. And so, guys like Doug Mensch, for the first time, somebody's looking at his plot and saying, Doug, this doesn't make sense, and he didn't want to hear it.
Sure.
And
Roy with Conan, am I right?
Well, I never had a problem with Roy. Roy's a great. He's a great writer.
He is a great writer.
He was terrified, though, that some of these people who handled stuff in the office might not be good enough for him, and so he wanted to be his own editor.
Yes.
And when I came in, I said, this writer-editor stuff is bad because they all think they rule their little titles, and
yeah.
And so in their contracts, the clause was Stan or his designated person. And so Stan wrote them all a letter designating me. So I'd have the ability to control the situation. And so I was not popular. Also, when I came in, everything was late, and I was making great efforts to get things on time. And guys who had been living in anarchy for a long time, and no one editing them, no one telling them anything, no one, sending in stuff late, and just missing deadlines all over the place. My first month there, of course, I'm taking over from the previous editor-in-chief, and everything was late. In fact, in January 1978, it's my first month, January 1978, we were supposed to publish 45 color comics. Only 26 made it out the door.
Wow.
26 out of 45. That's bad, all right? And the thing is, you schedule printing time, you schedule separating time. If that book doesn't show up, you pay anyway. And then when it does show up, you pay again.
Wow.
It's money, burning money like crazy. Okay, so I made it my business to get things on time. And when you're telling a writer, no, we're going to have to take a book away from you because you have 3 of them, you're only delivering 2 a month, and they're saying, you're cutting my income. You only get paid for what you deliver. And but there was fear and loathing.
I'm up.
And but we did get the books on time, and they stayed on time for 10 years. And because there was not money being wasted at the printer and the engraver, my deal with the president, I worked for the president, I reported to him. My deal with him was if I beat my projections or if I save money, I could use that money. And he didn't think either of those things were possible.
Sure.
And so he said, I don't care what you do. He said, do anything you want, just don't lose money. Because Marvel had been losing about $1 million a year before that.
Wow.
And the magazine division, which is not like Conan, it was like the men's magazines, the soap opera magazines, the puzzle books, they were losing $2.5 million a year.
Jesus. That was Cadence, right?
Well, it was all Marvel.
Okay, yeah.
And Marvel was owned by a conglomerate called Cadence.
Okay.
But that was part of Marvel.
Sure.
Yeah, and
but not just the black and whites, like you said. These
no,
other
it had
genres
nothing
as
to do
well.
with the comics.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
nothing to do with black and whites. It
Sure.
was like men's sweat magazines.
Oh yeah,
and
the men's adventure books,
yeah,
absolutely, and the
soap
romance
opera books.
I'm with you.
Mario Puzo wrote for them for a while. Anyway.
Yeah.
At any rate, he's just trying not to lose money. Okay, that's pretty freehand. So I was able to plow that money back in, give people raises, start getting better people, and make better books, and better books sold better, and they came out on time, which is important, because you go to that store and the book you want isn't there. It's really disappointing. I said, if somebody's coming to the store to get this book, it better be there. And there's no excuse, and you don't have to rush it. It's not about going fast or doing rush jobs. It's about just taking as much work as you can do with rare excellence. Walt Simonson always gave you his best. Archie Goodwin always gave you his best. They didn't take more work than they could handle. and they made what they did really good. So that's what I wanted. I didn't want anybody to rush. I didn't want anybody to hurry. I didn't want anybody to have to hurry. Anyway, I was unpopular for a while because this, I'm, taking books away from people and telling them they must be on time and all this. However, I started paying them lots more, doubled the rates, doubled them again.
Wow.
Kept raising them. Introduced programs like health insurance. Do 3 jobs a year, freelancer. 3 jobs a year, health insurance.
That's
good
fantastic.
Health insurance. Life insurance.
Wow.
Paid for all materials. Before that, they just provided the paper. I said, no. They won't let me change work for hire. But if it's work for hire, we provide all materials because you can't make the workers bring the leather to the shoe factory and then claim you own the shoes. It's you can't do that. So we provided pens, inks, brushes, anything, whiteout, whatever. And if you go to try to buy a Winsor Newton brush, better take a couple $100 with you. So that was a good benefit. And I said, if you're sending stuff to Marvel, I'll pay your postage. If you're calling business, I'll pay your phone bill.
Awesome.
If I ask you to come to the office, we'll pay your train fare. If I ask you to come from far away, we'll put you up in a hotel and feed you. Because I got this money by saving money, and then we started selling better, turned a corner. The direct market had just started, and it was starting to grow. So the whole market was growing. We were growing. Rising tide lifted all the boats. It was a good time for comics. The direct market made a venue for small publishers like ElfQuest and Cerebus and all those. But anyway, so at first they hated me. And then when they were all making money and had benefits and stuff, they liked me for a while. They got back to hating me later, don't worry. But things are good. So it wasn't the nightmare it might have been. It was because things were going pretty good. And also, Secret Wars sold tremendous numbers. And the books of the characters in Secret Wars, people who'd never read, say, Iron Man, they say, it's pretty cool. And they try Iron Man. And so the sales all went up. And it was really nice. And, it's like, that means you're pleasing more people. That means you can pay these artists what they deserve, or a fraction of what they deserve. You can swing for the fences. You can experiment. Things are going well. Yeah, we're Marvel Comics. If we can't experiment, who can? So if you see some crazy stuff that we did back then, that's why. We did it because we could.
That's awesome. More questions? Because again, I can always go, sir, speak up.
Why did they start hating me again? All right, well, see, we were too successful. We got to the point where we were 70% of the market. We're doing really well. And the Cadence board of directors was an evil group of financial weasels. And and for years, Marvel had been losing money. And all of a sudden, it's making money. Well, none of these guys ever asked or opened a book or tried to figure out why. They thought it was hula hoops. They thought it was a fad. And they had deliberately depressed the price of Cadence stock. The way they did that was the only company in their crummy little conglomerate that was doing well was us. All right? So they made us a division rather than a subsidiary, not to get too technical. But basically, they could lay off all the corporate expenses against us, all their fat cat salaries. And so it didn't look like Marvel was making all that much money, because you don't have to report a division separately. It can be reported as part of the company. So to the SEC, I'm talking. And so they kind of deliberately made it look worse than it was. And they depressed the price of the stock, and this is the board of directors screwing the shareholders. So then they make an offer to buy back all the stock, and they succeed. And then six men owned Cadence Industries, including Marvel. And they had, for the first couple of years, they were selling off, Perfect Subscription Company and U.S. Pen and Pencil and Vitamin Quota and all these other crappy companies. And then they came to the crown jewel, Marvel. And we were really on a high, and they had no faith that it would go farther. They thought, better get out while the getting is good. And so they tried to sell Marvel. Now, when you're selling a company and you're evil and greedy, you don't want to invest anymore. And furthermore, you want to cut costs, because every penny you put on the bottom line means you get like a quarter or 50 cents back when you sell the company. Because companies like Marvel are sold for a multiple of what's on the bottom line. All right? And you get a multiple like 20, 25, 30, you know. So every time they saved a penny or we made an extra penny, you know, their stake got richer. And so what they started doing is cutting the programs that I put in there. They eliminated our pension plan. They cashed it out. They got rid of the 401k, first the matching and then the 401k altogether. Then they eviscerated our health insurance. Instead of being really good health insurance, it became a crummy HMO that nobody took and you had to pay for.
Wow.
And so on. All right,
Yeah,
you get the drift. And I was upstairs fighting with these guys every day. They wanted to cancel the royalty program, and that's the one fight I won. That's the one fight I won, because I convinced them that you can't do that, because they want to do it retroactively, just suddenly stop paying. And I got in a screaming argument with the president, the financial officer, and who else? Oh, the executive vice president. Screaming argument with these guys in the hallway outside the president's office.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, we're going to quit. I'm going to go find a lawyer. We're going to have a class action suit. We're going to sue your asses. And the lawyer, the company counsel, his office was right around that area too. So he comes out and he turns to the three guys I'm arguing with. He says, "Gentlemen, he's right." And he just goes back to his office. So that's a one fight I won. Wow. But they were just killing us. And of course, a lot of it is blamed on me. You know, it's like, well, wait, isn't this your area? You're supposed to take care of this, you know? And what am I going to do? If I tell the guys the upstairs people are screwing you, then they all quit and go to D.C. and it's Jim Shooter's driving talent away, you know? Oh my God, you know. So anyway, I thought just I'll fight it as hard as I can, and maybe I can prevent some things from going wrong, and maybe the new owners will be better. They were worse, actually. They were worse.
This is New World, am I right?
New World Pictures, which changed its name to New World Entertainment.
Yes.
And so I forced them to fire me. Basically, what I did is I ratted them out. I told the new owners where the bodies were buried. And the CEO of New World came to my office and he said, "Every word you told us is true." He said, "We found out these people are weasels. They're all corrupt as hell, and they don't know what they're doing. They, you know, if they all drowned in the East River, no one would notice for a month, you know." And they said, "But we're a publicly traded company, and we can't just suddenly fire the executive staff of a company we bought for a whole bunch of money." He said, "So we're going to fire you." I said, "Okay, that's fine. I'm tired of this place." And so he said, "But don't worry." He said, "We're going to set you up in your own business. We're going to, you know," that's how we do it in Hollywood. You fire a studio chief. Next thing you know, he has his own independent production company. The studio pays for his staff, and he makes movies, and then the studio distributes them. And so we're going to do that with you. And but the people that I ratted out were really mad at me. And they dug their heels in it. And the thing is that Bob Ramey, the CEO of the other company, he wasn't going to go to the mat for me. I mean, you know, and so I was fired, and that was the end of that. And I was glad to get out of there. I went and started Valiant.
Yeah.
And then I ate their lunch. I went from 0 to 17% of the market in 1 year. And most of that came out of Marvel's hide. It's no wonder to this day they don't like me. Yeah. Anyway.
Corporations don't forget, man. I'm hip, and I've had that experience in broadcasting, so I know what you mean. And again, and please, I know they're going to tell us, like, stop soon because we're at less than 5 minutes, but if you don't mind... Oh, is there one more question, please?
No, that's our timekeepers are right there.
Oh, no, and I realize that. But, if we go a little bit over, because if you will, just for a couple of minutes, talk Valiant, because obviously the big next chapter.
Yeah, it's another story of evil, greedy bankers, I guess. But basically, I started Valiant, and it started 0, and it's like that old joke. They laughed when I sat down to play. I mean, Marvel was taking full-page ads in the buyer's guide, mocking us. Okay, and like when we did the flip book, they mocked us. 6 months later, they did flip books. When I did the all-black Solar cover, they ridiculed us. Took a full page ad in the buyer's guide to ridicule us. Jesus. And within 6 months, they had an all white book, an all red book, and an all black book. I say, that's all right. Yeah, you make fun of us, and then you do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, I really, we were doing some. I had kids out of the Kubert school. We didn't have any money. I had kids out of the Kubert school, and I had some old guys that nobody else wanted. You can't. You mean nobody wants Stan Drake? No, he couldn't get work. I was the only one giving work.
Wow.
John Dixon, Ernie Colon, Steve Ditko, Ralph Reese, Don Perlin.
These are masters, guys. If you don't know
and they
these
were
names,
great.
yeah.
So I had the old guys who knew what they were doing, and the young kids who were cubies. And Joe taught them to be professional, and they listened to the old guys.
Great school.
And they were getting better and better. And everyone else is doing flashy art and thin stories. And I said, that's what we have to fight back with, is story. We're going to outstory these guys, just outwork them.
100%.
And like I said, it worked. In a year, we were 17% of the market and shooting up, going up. And Marvel was coming down. And they weren't peeved about it. So peeved, in fact, that when I started Valiant, what happened to Valiant? My evil partner married the banker, and between the two of them, they controlled the board of directors. People wonder why I did Nintendo comics, because my partner who married the banker, he was a lawyer, and he represented Nintendo for media and entertainment. And so he made a deal with himself, both sides of the table. He makes a deal with himself, right? He gets a big fat fee, and now I'm doing Nintendo books. And if I threw a fit and quit, well, then Don Perlin's on the street, and J.J. Jackson, all my friends who came and worked for the pariah of comics and therefore were blacklisted, they wouldn't be able to get a job. So I thought, well, I'll just do as good as I can, and I'll try to, if I can make money with these things, then I can raise money and buy this turkey out. That's what he wants. He wants money, And so Nintendo, I couldn't. We did the best we could, but I couldn't make it happen. And then guess who else he represented? World Wrestling Federation. So now I'm doing wrestling comics. He makes a deal with himself, gets a fat fee, hundreds of thousands. And he was just trying. He'd never had any faith in the comics. He was just trying to get as much money out as he could.
Sure.
And so that didn't work yet. I did the best I could. Didn't work. And finally, he ran out of clients, and so I got to do my superheroes that I had licensed from Richard Bernstein, me. I licensed Del Gold Key characters from him. He tried to buy Marvel once, and he interviewed me a few times. He interviewed all the executives. The last interview he had with me, he said, these people don't know their product, they don't know their business. He said, they don't work. He said, none of these departments is making money except, the publishing. And he said, I think I'm buying you and a bunch of used furniture. And he didn't mean me, he meant us, the publishing. And so anyway, after I left there and he needed a gig, I went to him and I said, you've got some great characters. And he agreed to license them to me. I didn't have the money at the time. He said, I'll hold them for you. He held them 2 years.
Wow.
He got big offers from Marvel, DC, and other people, Dark Horse, but he was holding them for me. And I used to get a call from his licensing guy every week. You're going to do this? You sure you're going to do this? I could be making all this money. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And I did. Like I said, I picked bad partners, but a bad partner. For a while, we did the superheroes. It went really, we're fighting with what we had. That's why I was writing everything. I couldn't afford to pay anybody. We started work, and we started to get good. And then, of course, they shopped the company behind my back. And it got ugly, and long story short, I made them fire me again, so I could get out with not severance, but at least the rest of my contract. And then so I started a new company, and guess what I called it? Defiant. Good name. And and that went well too. The trouble there was the market collapsed.
Yes. Yes.
And they, not only the market collapsed, but Marvel sued me for, I had a comic called Plasm, and I get a call from Terry Stewart, and he says, I have to sue you for this. I said, why? He said, it's too close to one of ours. I said, I looked everywhere. There's nothing close to that. And he said, well, we don't have the property yet. We don't have it made, but we have the name registered with intent to use in UK, which is why I didn't turn up my search. They registered a name. They had nothing to go with it yet. Registered the name Plasmer. And I said, Terry, you've got a Black Knight, DC's got a Black Knight. You've got Wonder Man, they've got Wonder Woman. You've got Power Man, they've got Power Girl. Don't tell me this is too close.
Hilarious.
And he said, oh, no, Jim, we'll have to sue you. Yeah, well, they did, and it killed a $9 million guaranteed toy deal I had with Mattel because we missed our window. And then it cost me $300,000 to win. And not only did we win, to get a temporary injunction, which is what they were after, you have to win every point of 3 categories. They lost every point of 3 categories. My tough little Irish lady lawyer beat up 6 of their corporate guys. And they lost the whole thing. And the judge calls them up to the stands, the lawyers, and he covers the mic, but you could still hear him. He said, if you ever use my court as a business weapon again, you will regret it.
Wow.
And then he says, you will not appeal, you will withdraw the suit, or you will really, really regret it.
Wow.
And say, Marvel withdrew the suit. Because, if they don't withdraw the suit, then it's without prejudice. That means they can sue you again.
Right.
And so, but they withdrew the suit. But the trouble is, at that point, I lost my $10 million toy deal. I lost my $300,000 for legal fees and stuff. And I lost a whole bunch of time that I should have been working. Yeah. And so they got what they wanted. They put us out of business.
Shit.
Before we could eat another 17% of their market share.
Jesus.
So,
Jim, honestly, what an amazing journey of your career. We got to wrap, unfortunately, because there's another panel coming.
Yeah.
But truly, thank God, so much of your legacy endures.
I gotta tell you something. All that bad stuff I just talked about, nonetheless, it's been a good ride.
100%. Absolutely. And seriously, we've been appreciative of being along with the ride. And again, your body of work speaks for itself. I will ask later on in maybe a separate Word Balloon podcast what you've got coming next. I'm glad you're writing.
All right, good. Yeah, and anytime you go on, if anybody wants to hear more about any of this or any other horror stories, or you want me to talk about the good things,
come to his table.
Come to my table.
100%. Jim Shooter, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, this is Maisie Richardson-Sellers, and you are watching Fandom Spotlight. Be a legend and hit that like button, and most importantly, have fun and follow your fandom.